The Super Nintendo is arguably the best system for a lot of people. Of course, there are great games for the Sega Genesis, but for people my age, the Super Nintendo was the console that defined our adolescence. A ton of great RPGs, really capable arcade ports, and of course, some of the greatest Super Mario games to this day. And it all came in a really unique style that people still debate on to this day. However, the Super Nintendo does have its flaws, and they're mainly cosmetic. The first generation shells were made with a fire retardant known as bromine mixed in with the ABS plastic. It wasn't really that big of a deal at the time, but the bromine would react with the UV light and turn a nasty yellow that looked like the Super Nintendo was trapped in a smoker's home, and you couldn't wipe it off. There is a way to remove this yellowing, it's called retrobrighting, but the procedure isn't permanent, and over time the plastic does get brittle whether you retrobright it or not. So what is one to do? Well, you could get a replacement shell from Retro Game Restore. They have created a high quality translucent replacement shell for the Super Nintendo, and I just so happen to have one in my possession. Now this isn't cheap. With free shipping, I paid $127, and that came direct from Retro Game Restore. I ordered it in May and it just showed up now in September. Now you don't have to order it directly from them, you can order it from Castlemania Games and you might get it a little bit faster, but it is slightly more expensive at $129 and you are subject to tax, and for me that was an extra $11. Also, there isn't a lot that's included. You get two pieces, a top and a bottom, and the rest of the parts will need to come from your donor Super Nintendo, screws and all, so keep that in mind as well. And when you do get your shells, you'll need a GameBit driver to remove the hexagon screws from your Super Nintendo and a Phillips head screwdriver for the rest of the screws inside. I suggest when you do deconstruct the Super Nintendo, you give everything a good cleaning, as you will be able to see everything in this system. And as you can see, mine was pretty dirty as I found this at Goodwill for $10. The shell was pretty beat up with some serious cuts, but this is a desirable one-chip Super Nintendo, which supposedly gives out the best possible picture. Once the Super Nintendo is deconstructed and clean, I suggest moving one piece over at a time so that everything is brought over properly. There's not a lot to do and it's really straightforward, but it keeps everything organized. I suggest making sure that the new shell is on a soft towel so that way you don't accidentally scratch it. It does seem pretty resilient, but nothing is worse than scratching up your brand new item that wasn't cheap to begin with. When removing the power and reset tabs, be careful not to break off the tabs. Like I mentioned before, some of the plastic has become brittle over time and you don't want to break them. It's getting hard to find replacements. Also, there's a spring to return the reset button back in place, so you don't want to lose that either. The power button does fit snugly in place and it will take some force to move, but I'm sure over time it will loosen up. The clear shell doesn't use every part from the Super Nintendo. You have a clamp used for the dust door and the Super Nintendo logo piece left over, and so you can just put those away for now. Putting the dust door in place was pretty tricky because the spring kept wanting to come back up, so I took a long thin pair of pliers to hold it down while I screwed in the rest of the plastic shroud in place. After that, you can move on to the bottom, making sure to unscrew everything first. Depending on your revision, the RF shielding on the front of the board is connected to the cartridge slot, so you'll want to leave that in place if you aren't sure how to reattach it. I didn't know anything about it, so I just left it where it is because I didn't want to break it. After everything is unscrewed, you can remove the eject mechanism, being mindful not to lose those springs, and then unplug the ribbon cable from the controller port in front and then remove the motherboard. There are a couple of little pieces of metal on the bottom of the case that aren't part of the motherboard, but those will be put into the new shell. Like I mentioned before, this is a very bare bones shell. It didn't even include that little expansion port tab at the bottom, so you'll need that from the donor Super Nintendo as well. And after you're done removing everything, you just put it back in its new shell, making sure to line up the screw holes with the new post. Like I said, it's really straightforward, and I think the biggest hassle I had was making sure that all of the springs were set in their proper place. After everything is set up and in place, you can button up everything and you're good to go. You'll notice that a lot of the screws will take some extra force to screw in, and the good thing is that since this is a transparent case, you can see where the screw heads are in relation to the cases, and if they're still poking out, you can keep on going. And there you go, the Super Nintendo now looks more 90s than ever, and I really like transparent stuff from this era. I have a Game Boy Play It Loud, Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color, and I plan on getting some more translucent cases for stuff that wasn't stock clear, not just the atomic purple stuff. So let me know if there are some translucent shells that you want to see. So now that I've had this case for a while, what do I think? Well, I think it's pretty expensive, but the quality of the case is pretty nice. It has a really thick shell, and it is almost a one-to-one recreation of the original Super Nintendo shell. If you want to continue the transparent look, Retro Game Restore has North American Super Nintendo cartridge slot covers that are transparent, but I kind of like the original plastic. If yours is broken, it's not a bad price to replace it. I hope to see clear Super Nintendo controller shells to complete the ensemble. I see that they make translucent EverDrives, and that would make it really complete. If you're an owner of the Super Famicom or the European Super Nintendo version, they sell transparent cases for that along with the PC Engine. And if super clear isn't your jam, they also have a smoked clear case available for pre-order along with the smoked version of the Model 1 Genesis, which is pretty dope. I only own the second generation. So that's going to wrap up this video. Let me know in the comments if you plan on getting this case or if you have a minty Super Nintendo that you don't want to dismantle. If you like this video, please give it a like and share it with those who might find it interesting. If you're new here, consider subscribing for future content. I mainly forecast price trends in video games with these types of videos sprinkled in, but if that's something that you're interested, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SNICTendo. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Super Nintendo, and I'll see you next time.